Good morning, everyone. Good
Good morning.
morning, good afternoon, good evening, and a warm welcome to each one of you joining for this international webinar on human trafficking and COVID-19. I'm sure some of you might be wondering why I'm saying good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Friends, we have 2,900 plus participants registered from 16 different countries across the world. This overwhelming response show your heart and drive to combat this issue of human trafficking. Thank you so much for joining us today. Human trafficking is an organized crime. To combat this organized crime, the anti-human trafficking stakeholders need to be organized. Today, we have wide range of participants, the government officials, law enforcement officials, national and international NGO personnel, anti-human trafficking experts, policy makers, judiciary, academician, research scholars, and students. I'm sure this webinar will help us to come together to fight this crime of human trafficking in more organized way, especially during COVID-19 pandemic situation. I'm Dr. Devasitham, Associate Director from International Justice Mission. International Justice Mission is a global organization that protects the most vulnerable from violence and oppression across the globe. IJM India works alongside with the state and central government to eradicate two forms of human trafficking, bonded labor and sex trafficking of minor. We work alongside with government officials and NGOs to rescue, rehabilitate victims, prosecute the offenders, and build the capacity of public justice officials. I would like to inform you, friends, this is also another small announcement, and we will be taking questions at the last. So take notes and kindly send your questions using Q&A options. You can also email or WhatsApp your questions through email and contact details mentioned in the webinar poster. Without taking much of your time, I would like to introduce our moderator for this webinar, Ms. Merlin Frieda. Ms. Merlin Frieda is the Director of Operation International Justice Mission Chennai. After working as Deputy Director at HelpAge India for 7 years, Merlin joined IJM and started a fight against human trafficking 8 years ago. Merlin oversees the functionality and smooth operations of IJM Chennai field office. She headed a team of 60 staff focused on rescuing victims, rehabilitate survivors, prosecute the offenders, and provide expert training, consultation to various stakeholders across Tamil Nadu. As part of her achievements, Merlin led the team to success in mobilizing hundreds of stakeholders, civil society partners to take part in the system reform efforts. Under her leadership, the Chennai team has supported the government to launch the Tamil Nadu First State Action Plan and standard operating procedure to address bonded labor issue. More than 1,500 survivors of human trafficking have been empowered through the association of associating themselves called Rescued Bonded Labor Association. Ma'am, thank you so much for accepting our invitation, and I welcome you to moderate this session.
Thank you, Dr. Devasitham. That was a grand introduction. I'm not sure if I deserve all of that. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon and good evening to those who have joined from multiple corners of the earth. Once again, a warm welcome to this webinar on the impact of COVID-19 on human trafficking. We are all here because we believe that we have collective responsibility to end human trafficking, both at the national level in our own countries and at the global level. Many experts in the anti-trafficking ecosystem think that COVID-19 is going to make victims of human trafficking more and more vulnerable, and it will bring in a surge in the number of individuals who are newly exposed to the exploitation. These experts also think that the organized crime network will possibly change their modus operandi to trap young women and children. In an environment where priorities and actions are geared towards limiting the spread of the virus, it is easier for the traffickers to hide their operations, making victims increasingly invisible. I'm going to refer UNODC's analysis that recently said COVID-19 is having an impact on the lives of trafficking victims now, and even after. It will have an impact after this ordeal. there is a possibility children and women be forced into the streets in search of food and money, thus increasing their risk of exploitation. We may be seeing child sexual abuse materials that are produced and that are accessed, and live stream child sexual abuse online has now become an easy alternative to lure children into sexual activities and thereby to trade images in online communities. So what is needed at this juncture is one thing, just one thing, which is foresight and preparedness. That's why you and I are here at this webinar today. And if we have foresight and preparedness, we will be able to definitely save millions and millions of women, men, and children from exploitation across the globe. We are moving on to our sessions today. We have 5 sessions, interesting session. We have great speakers with us. The first section, the session is going to be on human trafficking, its current trends, vulnerabilities, and the dimension that it is going to take post-COVID. And first speaker of the webinar is Dr. P.M. Nair. Dr. P.M. Nair is former Director General, National Disaster Response Force and Civil Defense, Government of India. He is an internationally acclaimed and UN-recognized expert on human trafficking. He comes with 40 years of rich experience from more than 20 fields. For Dr. P.M. Nair, the mission against human trafficking continues even after his retirement from the government, and that's definitely making a paradigm shift in India. He served as a nodal officer for anti-human trafficking in National Human Rights Commission, India, and he also served with UNODC as a project coordinator. Dr. Nair has trained over 50,000 police officials and prosecutors across the country. He was instrumental in setting up anti-human trafficking units in the country. It just started with 9 units, and today we have over 400 units across the country approved by Government of India. He drafted the trafficking bill for the Government of India in 2016 as decided by the then Union Minister of the country. Dr. P.M. Nair's handbook on addressing sex trafficking is one of the best circulated, translated, and appreciated resource material in the country. If you have not had a chance to pick that book, please reach out to Dr. P.M. Nair. Starting with rescue of 113 bonded laborers in 1982, he has thus far rescued over 50,000 victims. How do we sum up? To sum up, I would call Mr. Nair as the father of anti-trafficking efforts in the Indian subcontinent. We are so proud to have you with us, Dr. P.M. Nair. Over to you for the next 15 minutes.
Thank you. Welcome all. Good to see Professor Carey there. And I'm sure Ms. Deepika also will be there. Thank you, Dr. Deva. Thank you, Madam Merlin, for all that. I don't know, I really deserve that. Let me thank Sathyabama University, a prestigious university, private university, headed by Dr. Maria Ziana Johnson, perhaps the youngest chancellor in the country, or maybe elsewhere too. She is a vibrant person who takes proactive stand in all activities. And Professor Dilshad is the dean of the law, and she is the one who said, why not start up a webinar? And how do we make it international? I said international means we have such distinguished, such eminent persons working in this field for a long time. So here you have, then came the support of IJM, International Justice Mission, a wonderful agency. After reading the book, Locust Crest by Mr. Gary Hagen, I fell in love with that book and with the author, and met him much later. So this is IJM. He leads IJM. It's a wonderful agency throughout India doing a commendable work. So I'm so happy that this webinar has been sponsored by Sathyabama University and IJM. It's a delight for me to work along with them. And in that process, I have 15 minutes time, 15 minutes time to speak on the dimensions of trafficking. When I speak, I notice that among the audience, At least 80% are students and activists on ground. So I would rather focus my attention to them and not the distinguished participants, because they all know what it is. So my focus on this presentation is more or less to the youngsters in the group who have registered as participants. So a grand welcome to all of you. Let me move on to what is human trafficking in the given context. First of all, we must remember that human trafficking is something an organized crime. But in the presentation, we will start with a few indicators and responses, and also trying to understand the COVID scenario and see what we can do. Maybe we can think of two questions: how do we identify human trafficking in our community? And the second point is as to what we can do. From that perspective, if you see the conventions and protocols across the globe, I don't think there is any country where there is shortage of such legal systems, legal regimes. UN protocol under the UN Transnational Organized Crime Convention of 2000. Then we have SAARC convention in the Indian region, South Asian region. Then constitution of almost all the countries in South Asia as a particular constitutional provision which makes human trafficking prohibited, which prohibits human trafficking. Then you have a legal regime across the globe. I think every country has got something or other on human trafficking. Well, at the end of the day, if you see all these provisions, etc., there are two things stand out in human trafficking. One is commercialization of human beings, that is buying and selling human beings as if they are a commodity. So it's commoditization. And second is exploitation. It's a deprivation of not only freedom and dignity, but making money out of that. It's a commercial exploitation. That is what is human trafficking all about. If you classify the main activities of human trafficking, you can see actions, you can see the methods, and you can see the purpose. Action could be recruiting or transporting or harboring or transferring or receiving. And modus operandi or the methods can be by threat or coercion, abduction, deception, abuse of power, inducement. Purpose could be for sexual exploitation or physical exploitation or slavery or practice similar to slavery or servitude, and for removal of organs. I'm giving a definition on the Indian Penal Code, but this is almost at par across the globe. Now, types of human trafficking we see, you can have a labor trafficking, then you have a sex trafficking, you have organ trafficking. At the ground, they all may be mixed up together. For example, 5,000 women and girls from a state in India, Jharkhand, taken to Delhi for domestic labor. They were trafficked for domestic labor. Now, 89% of them have been sexually violated. Data is shocking, which is only what we know about, and what we don't know is still amazing, still mind-boggling. So even the data which we know about is something which is very, very disturbing. As regards India, the TIP report says source and destination, but India is also a transit country. I'm sure many of the participants here will know very well about this scenario. Coming to the Crime Records Bureau in India, that's under the Ministry of Home Affairs, Government of India, they publish crimes. Sorry, I couldn't get the latest one, but we compiled about the 2 years back. Imagine 8,000 plus crimes every year. And in a year, you have 18% increase. And that shows so many children trafficked and exploited and violated. The number, what you have here is only of those crimes which have been registered with the police, where the police have initiated action. The matter which has not been acted upon by the police, God knows. The matter which has not been reported to police, still God knows. Even God only knows. Excuse me. When it comes to child trafficking in India, as is the case probably across the globe, children and women are the most vulnerable for human trafficking. There's a high demand for children, not only in sex, but for labor too. Boys, normally we think they are exploited in labor, but boys are exploited in sex too. And for labor, we generally think it's the boys that are exploited, but there are a lot many girls too. Then 59% of human trafficking crimes registered were child trafficking. That again is not the correct data. Most of the children, most of the persons who have been rescued were trafficked as children. So now I call as adult, but they were not when they were trafficked. So if you see the dimensions, I would put it across 80 to 90% are child trafficking. Now, it could be trafficked. What are they trafficked for? In sexual exploitation, it could be for, earlier it was brothel based. Now, non-brothel based means all sort of commercial ventures are coming. Electronic based, you have sex tourism, all sort of nomenclature, culturally sanctioned practices still going on in many places. Religious tourism, facade of massage parlor, escort service, tourist circuit, bartending, pornography, all sort of dimensions are coming in human trafficking. Now, innovations. Human brain ingeniously is distorted to human trafficking too, for surrogacy, as guinea pigs, for adoption, through adoption, reported missing but trafficked. And when it comes to the victims, how they are devastated, understand the profile of a victim. I'm happy Dr. Kalyani is going into the psychology of the victim too. You understand the profile of the victim. The child has been, the person has been, and I take as a child, take any person for that matter, has been lured or deceived or defrauded or coerced. Then criminal confinement is there, physical torture, physical injury, mental torture, mental devastation. Person has been sold, has been purchased, has been ravished repeatedly. Then victim of sexual perversions. Then it's a continuing crime. There is servitude, there's death bondage, privacy is denied, justice denied, and yet no redressal. A victim of criminal conspiracy, abusers across the globe and sitting in different places. So a plethora of human rights violations. All this together, I call it as a basket of crime. It's a basket of crime. It's a multitude of crime. Of course, an organized crime and a continuing crime. Human smuggling and human trafficking are different. The distinction is there. In smuggling, the person smuggled is having a consent, given consent. And smuggling is across the borders, but trafficking can be within the country or beyond, or trans-border too. But we must remember, a person who gives consent is not always smuggled. I may have agreed for a given consent to go abroad as a domestic help. I would have forged my passport. When I land up there, if I am sexually violated, I become a sex slave. That's not what I came for. That means under the garb of smuggling, there is trafficking too. We find there are two major reasons for trafficking. One is we call them as vulnerability factor. Second is a demand factor. You can call it push factor and pull factor also. Now, when you come to the vulnerability factors, based on the research which we did in India, I put it across on the priority list. Normally, we think it's poverty, but poverty comes somewhere lower down. Ignorance of rights is on top. Then lack of access to rights. Rights are there, but there is no access to rights. We have seen a lot of migrants moving around in the country. You must see in the TV now. Everybody says so much money is there, so much facility is there, but where is access? So access to rights is something which we have failed to ensure. By just giving money, it's not access. Then illiteracy, gender discrimination, neglect and lack of community and family care, abuse of children in different locations and violations, economic deprivation, poverty, and disasters and resultant distress. COVID itself is a classic example. I was privileged to be the head of the National Disaster Response Force. Once the Home Minister asked me, the minister, who is the first responder in human trafficking? First responder in a disaster. I said, first responder is a human trafficker. The rest will come later because trafficker is right there. It could be male, could be female, anybody else, any disaster, even COVID. Now come to demand factors. The very demand itself, I may not demand a girl or a boy because I know I should not. That's inherent in me. But why my neighbor demands? There is commercialization of human being, the power and authority. I go by Gary Hogan's book, Locust Stress. He brings the entire scenario of human trafficking to the question of violence. Actually, it is violence. Violence shown as authority or power or profit, then anonymity, impunity, poor and distorted law enforcement. Distorted means trafficked victims being prosecuted as offenders, as prostitutes. That's wrong. In fact, a trafficked person is never a prostitute. Rather, I would go one step further. For my dictionary, no woman is a prostitute. It's a prostituted woman. No child is a prostitute. It's a prostituted child. From that perspective, we have to understand demand factors too. Well, there's a very important linkage on the missing children. It is not only in India's children, but entire region. Bangladesh, Pakistan, Myanmar, Sri Lanka, Nepal, all these countries have this problem in this region. Even Philippines, Malaysia, going beyond also. So many children, of course, men too, women too, are reported missing. Where are they? I'm giving you data. When I did the study, for National Human Rights Commission in 2004. That time we found 44,000 children reported missing and 11,000 remaining untraced. In 2010-11, along with Kailash Satyarthi, our Nobel laureate, I could do a study along with him. In that study, we found 110,000 children are reported missing, of which 41,000 are remaining untraced. Where are they? They have not gone under the ocean. They are somewhere there. They are begging in the street, or they're made to beg in the street. They are the Britkins. They are in all sort of labor exploitation or sexual exploitation, which agencies, many of you in this audience, have been doing a great job of rescuing them too. Traffickers are well aligned. I'm very happy Dr. Deva started by saying that traffickers network and RV network, RV associated, RV getting together. I'm very happy that this forum is giving an impetus for us to work together. We have to form a network like this. We have to form a network like this. A psychologist there, an activist there, an academician here, an NGO there. All of us have to work together and fight the traffickers. It could be starting there. Traffickers are spotters, recruiters, sellers, buyers, transporters, abusers, exploiters, financiers, custodians, keepers, PIM contractors. It's a huge network. I'm only giving a list of people who have come out in the investigation. There are many more. It's a massive network, could be spread across the globe anywhere. When it comes to electronic transfer, when it comes to internet, you don't know where they are. They are somewhere in the electronic heaven. Now, huge money being generated. I have given the data from the ILO. When we did the study in 2005, this is what we found: $400,000 generated in 1 year by trafficking 1,000 women and girls to Delhi. Kailash Satyarthi study, $360 billion by trafficking children in India. Imagine the money. This is all published document. Now, trafficking routes. Professor Carey organized a very interesting conference, and she wanted me to speak on trafficking routes. That sets me thinking. I draw a map, etc. Started working on this further. And trafficking routes are amazing. It could be linear, could be multilinear, could be a matrix, could be mega matrix, could be circular, complex, and all sorts of definitions we can give. It's amazing world. Demand is very high because of the internet, and more so in all sort of exploitation that the person who demands is not being dealt with. In the given situation, law enforcement, the demand part is not given much attention. That's a big drawback. We tend to focus on the rescue part or the source area, but we are not giving much attention to demand. If all of us together decide, all my wonderful youngsters in the audience, all of us take a decision that we shall not watch child pornography. We shall not watch child pornography. All the child pornographers have to close the shop. Let's take a decision. For every pornography, for every child pornography, to be specific, they are exploiting one child or many children. So if we decide not to watch, they have to stop exploitation. So first ways of stopping exploitation is stopping demand. I think we are all part of that mission. We can take it forward. So it has to be, when you want to attend to human trafficking, a PPP model is the best. UN also sponsored this: prevention, protection, prosecution. And from that perspective, the response systems in the prevention, protection, prosecution, we know the scenario across the globe, but these questions will answer the answers. First of all, are we linking up the source, transit, destination? Are we attending to only poverty and not to other vulnerable factors? Are we containing demand? All the stakeholders, are we involved? Today we have so many stakeholders. How many of us are involved in the entire actual process on the ground? Are the duty holders accountable? If I am a police officer, am I accountable? If I don't do my job, are you asking me questions? You are not. Why not? How to address the transport issues? When it comes to protection, Professor Kalyani's message, psychological care. You know, I'm sorry to say, in the entire given system in India, maybe 1% or maybe less than 1% psychological care is being attended to. 99%, we don't care about that. That when the person is even punished, we don't ask the child what harm the child has suffered. Child must have suffered immensely for 14 years, 15 years in incarceration in a brothel or a massage parlor somewhere. The man gets away with punishment of 2 years and 2 lakh rupees. what is it? The man should have been punished for life because he has spoiled the life of so many women for so many years. And what psychological relief you have given? Then rehabilitation, is it legally mandatory? It is not. Unless you have a rehabilitation or legal mandatory, the things won't move. It cannot be a welfare act, has to be a rights-based act. Victims' participation, survivors' participate in decision making. Thus the court asks a victim, okay, what do you have to say about the punishment? Never, ever. Never, ever. Why not? I think it's time we thought about that. Rehabilitation is not sustainable because there is no life of dignity. NGOs are involved whenever they want, or NGOs involved whenever they want. It is not that way. There is no systemic involvement of the civil society. Corporates and business houses have CSR money there. Are they being utilized for human trafficking? A lot of money is going for various activities, but how many corporates are using that? Now, transport issues also a major issue in that. When it comes to prosecution, how many crimes are investigated, delays in justice, lack of priority, attitudinal issues. Women are being prostituted as prostitutes, prosecuted as prostitutes. They are victims. And who listens to the victim? The psychological counseling part. Offender is getting a long rope. He gets bail. He is outside, but the victim is incarcerated. Even here, the transport issues are so complicated. There is no networking across the border. We have to go. Traffickers can walk across, traffic across, and move on. But the law enforcement official goes to the border and stops there. Law of the country does not permit me to enter Myanmar. I'm sure a youngster and a police officer here must be in the audience. I hope he's there. 149 Nepali girls trafficked from Nepal to India, and we were going to Myanmar to Singapore. They were stopped in the Indian border. They were there for 1 month to fabricate their passport, etc. This young IPS officer, police officer detained them, rescued them. But the torture which he had to undergo is amazing. The point I'm trying to make is the legal complications. The girl died in Singapore. She is a Nepali citizen. Passport is forged as Myanmar. The Singapore said, show me your original passport. And the girl could not be brought back to Nepal because the passport is forged. The mother was crying, the father was crying, nobody could help. And the body was burned there. These are transport issues, many in plenty. Well, I think my time is over now, getting over. Good practice models, I'll stop with 2 minutes. Madam Melly, you can take your hand and show if my time is up. Good practice model we show on an anti-human trafficking unit. It's first time we started in 2007. Thanks to UNODC, they gave me the opportunity. Anti-human trafficking unit. It's a combination of police officers, NGOs, and all other stakeholders. We bring them together, make them live together, work together, deliver together, mentor them, and task them. Accountability factors melt into them. Knowledge, skills, attitudes, resources, all are given, and constant mentoring. I could set up only 9 ASUs. They were so useful based on external evaluation, and finally, Government of India replicated them into 460 now. Transfer of video conferencing across the border is a very interesting thing which has been done by Mumbai court. Judicial court took one step forward. The girl sitting in Nepal, she was trafficked and sent back home. Now she's married and settled. She doesn't want to come back. So the court took an initiative. All of us got together and court had a in-camera trial in Mumbai. The victim is sitting in Nepal. Now what a wonderful thing. And then we have a victim sitting in Bangladesh. We did the trial. And all these cases, the offenders have been convicted. So we took one step forward in having a video conferencing across the border. Here is an SOP on that too. Another interesting thing is that the entire concept of research and action. Research and action. It's something very rare across the world. I'm sure US it happens much, but here in UK also, but here it's far and few. So we did a research on human trafficking. Then the findings were brought in. They were implemented. It was evaluated, replicated, analyzed, and now it goes on. The entire cycle is complete. So this is a very interesting model of a research into action. And in that, we found the skills are required. All of us have to make it a mass movement. Human trafficking can be contained only when it is a mass movement. So therefore, involving the youth, anti-human trafficking club. I request all the participants here, please, you start anti-human trafficking club in your colleges. Like the way you have debating club or a sports club, start anti-human trafficking club. Start with humble, simple things. If I respect my daughter, respect neighbor's daughter. If my daughter is not for sale, your daughter is also not for sale. At the end of the day, if anti-human trafficking mission can be taken forward, I think we can do a lot. In the COVID scenario, lot of exploitative labor is coming up. Migrant labor issues is gone beyond control. Many migrants have been pushed back home. They don't know what to do and how to do. After 2 months' time, it's going to a completely complex scenario across the globe. COVID borrowings are very high. All of them are bonded. Migrants have been bonded anyway. Now they are much, much more bonded. It's bonded forever. A tragic scenario is going to come up. So all of us here have to work together in the post-COVID scenario. We do our best to ensure trafficking is prevented. And coming to child sexual abuse at home, internet is yellow with all sort of offenses. Children are glued to the TV or a cell phone, and the traffickers are being exploiting them. Earlier, when the children were abused at home by parents or teacher or somebody, sorry, parents or uncle or somebody, they could come and tell their peers. Now they can't even go to the peers. We have no contract there. So there are a lot of abuse are happening at home, and traffickers are making the best in this scenario in both sex trafficking and labor trafficking. So ladies and gentlemen, I stop with this message. Can we identify the victims and vulnerable? Can we identify the hot spots and tell the police and prosecution? Can we locate the missing children and help their rehabilitation and take them back home? Can we help the civil society like I am here and the police in response? Can we identify traffickers and blow the whistle? Please do that, because at the end of the day, demand has to be controlled. Can we make the anti-human trafficking units effective? Walk into them, work with them, make them talk. You go there, they will start functioning. Then anti-human trafficking clubs, and make it a mass movement. Let's make it a mass movement post-COVID scenario, a task given to all of us through this webinar. I am sure all of you will do our best. Let's take it forward. Please be in touch and take it forward. Stop it, spot it, speak it, stop it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nair, for that insightful presentation. And to all your questions, our answer would be yes. You very well explained human trafficking and how it evolves these days, and the importance of creating a movement that will have government, a movement that will have law enforcement officials, a movement that will have academic institutions and general public. It is not possible to end human trafficking just by one power actor. We all will have to come together. Thank you for spotting out that. And thank you for the 3 S that you said: spot it, speak it, and stop it. That was a crystal clear and passionate presentation. We are so grateful to you. Thank you so much. Participants, we are moving on to the next session. I know it's quite tempting to ask questions to Dr. P.M. Nair. Please park all your questions. We will have Q&A time for you. We will have 15 minutes of Q&A time. We will be able to take questions to our panelists. Our next presentation is going to be on human trafficking and Sustainable Development Goals. And our speaker for that presentation is Dr. Carrie Pemberton Ford. She is the Executive Director and founder of Cambridge Center for Applied Research in Human Trafficking University in Cambridge. She's a popular speaker. She has spoken at TEDx as well, and a prolific author who has given lectures internationally. She has been a panelist and platform speaker on events addressing counter-terrorism, counter-trafficking in Switzerland, Romania, and Italy, Spain. The list is on. In the best interest of time, I'm not able to call out all of that. She has been developing papers on issues pertaining to child rights and child protection. Dr. Ford held a UNITA Fellowship advising the UN Institute of Training and Research in issues pertaining to human trafficking and gender equality. Her presentation into NATO's high-level symposia on the impact of heightened migratory flows into the Balkans is currently being developed, and you will soon find that in the libraries. Dr. Ford is founding trustee of HOPE, and she's also founding trustee of Seraph Churches working for social justice. She is very well recognized for her work on exposing the challenges faced by African communities, particularly focusing on Nigerian and West Africans in Britain and Europe. There's a lot to talk about her. Maybe I will touch upon one last thing. She has taught and supervised graduates in several universities: Oxford University, Uppsala University, University of Cambridge, University of Coventry, Romanian University, and the list is again on and on and on. Those who are interested in working with Dr. Ford are invited to explore a bursary package with her, which is available for about 2 to 3 students for a research-based internship. You can reach out to her for more information. Dr. Ford, we're so proud to have you with us at this seminar, and we are going to listen to you on the impact of human trafficking on SDGs, especially on SDG 8.7. For the next 15 minutes, you're on this topic. Over to you.
Hey everybody, greetings. It's a bit early here in the UK, but it's wonderful to be sharing this this platform. Thank you so much, PM, for having organised this, and IJM India. We look forward to some closer cooperation going forward with this wonderful initiative, and it's great to be here. Now, I head up a centre in Cambridge. It's called the Cambridge Centre for Applied Research in Human Trafficking. Every year we hold a big symposium. For the last 2 or 3 years, PM has been coming to that virtually through Zoom and GoToMeeting, and it's been great to be building that relationship. Thank you, PM. It's been wonderful. Also with Dr. Kalyani Gopal, I was over at her SAFE conference last year in Chicago. Brilliant. And we were talking about the SDGs there as well. And in this next month, in June, we'll be holding a symposium specifically 5 days on the Sustainable Development Goals. Some of you will be aware of the Sustainable Development Goals, others not. So here's a quick pace through it in terms of how that works in deconstructing and highlighting challenges around human trafficking. And I've also added an element there of, in the face of the terrible COVID-19 that we're all having to come to terms with, our different nations working out how to limit the damage on our populations of this terrible new pandemic. And I guess when Corona and COVID-19 struck, I started immediately thinking about the impacts of that on human trafficking and how that all works, and all the vulnerabilities that are around inside our world, across our world. And we saw immediately as countries went into lockdown, those who were not nationals of their country being moved, evicted, sent home, stuck at borders, millions and millions of migrant workers either being stopped at borders, being thrown out of houses, on the move. And you know what that has looked like in India. You've seen incredible pictures of that on your TV screens, on your internet feeds, in your papers. Thousands and thousands, scores of thousands, up to millions moving across the globe. I mean, we've been upset, haven't we, about missing our university classes if you're students, or missing your work colleagues, the inconvenience of it. But it's nothing like what has been happening for those who are in the position of migrant labour without protection, being moved in scores of thousands with no physical separation, very few here with face masks. Many of them, if you'd stop them, where are you going to be staying the night? They haven't a clue. You're aware of what happened in terms of the mass eviction of Rohingya from across the way into Bangladesh. Well, they all were already at huge risk, just under 2 million there in Bangladesh before COVID struck. And here's just the figures from one of the disabilities charities working there. What has happened to those people, goodness knows at the moment. And this is the problem about human trafficking. It works in environments where there are very few eyes on in terms of protection of people. And this is what the SDGs is designed to enlighten us around, because it gives a 17-point access into trying to build protection around people. Now, if we could just roll on to the picture of Sao Paulo, that would be great. So that's a couple more on. Whilst the COVID pictures that we're seeing coming out of the media, and in fact our sort of number crunching, our data analysis is looking at the number of deaths and the number of those infected. Actually, what we need to be very attentive to is the risk that everybody is being put under. And if you're in a position of vulnerability already, that is going to be made, scores times worse. If you aren't able to protect yourself, if you can't get access to food, you've got underlying health issues anyway, that is all in the category of those who are at risk of trafficking or are in a position of being trafficked. So Sao Paulo is burying its dead. Coronavirus is not actually an equal destroyer. It's an equal infector. It is not an equal destroyer. And if you see on that screen there, and I can't see it completely on my screen, but that coronavirus, says General Antonio Guterres, does not discriminate, but its impacts do. Its impacts do, exposing deep weaknesses. This is our world he's talking about, by the way, not another world, exposing deep weaknesses in the delivery of public services and structural inequalities that impede access to them. And that's Antonio Guterres talking in 2020. And we need to hold that in our minds as we go forward. Could you drop the next slide, please? So we've got Indian migrant labour on the move. And we've got actually in this time, one of the benefits of this time, bizarre silver lining to this horrible time, is that the number of fresh registrations that have suddenly come up and onto your Migrant Workers Act that is 40 years in your legislative system, is that you've already had something like 300,000 new registrations as migrant labour is encouraged by its unions to get registered. It's terribly important that we see where people are and what is happening to them. Registration both of births, that's a very important one, who have we actually got, and registration of workers, where are people working and how can we see how their work conditions are. That is absolutely vital. One of the SDGs that we need to look at and hasn't been indicated as a major player for looking at trafficking actually is good health and well-being. And actually this has been an indicator that should have been, I think, put into the tabs of what we need to look at for counter-trafficking. Because if you don't have reliable access to health at point of need, you will have people desperate and doing desperate measures to get hold of it. And it is one of the vectors that drives human trafficking. People get trafficked because they're trying to solve either their own health care issues, more than normal though, is looking at the healthcare issues of others, and it puts people into tremendous vulnerability. So I want you to just have a little look at those red lines there at the bottom. Inequalities, vulnerabilities, need for essential social protection, the number of people below the radar we have internationally, migrant peoples extremely vulnerable to human trafficking of all ages, online migration of abuse that is happening even now, I'll talk about that a bit later, and the health and safety trauma, both of the actual impact of trafficking and post-trafficking. Could you give me the next slide, please? Thank you. And here we have how the SDGs work. And, you know, everybody likes a lovely panel, don't they, nowadays, with project planning. And here we have 17, roughly times 10. Actually, there are 167 separate targets to be hit on the Sustainable Development Goals. It's actually fairly comprehensive. It's not totally comprehensive in terms of what needs to be in there, but we've got 167 to be going for, so we should be paying attention to them. And we will be able to look later at the actual elements of all of those, but the three targets that are there for human trafficking are 5.2, gender equality, number 8, decent work and economic growth, and number 16, peace, justice and strong institutions. And that's what the UN is looking at in terms of really targeting the areas that need to be addressed to address human trafficking. And we're only 10 years away now from its deadline. And quite frankly, with COVID coming in, we're going to be a long way back. I think if we even go for 2050 for some of these challenges, we'll be lucky. So let's just dig in quickly. There's a lot to get through, so I'm just going to speed through these. Gender equality, 5.2. The target is for the elimination of all forms of violence against women, girls in the public and private spheres, including trafficking and sexual and other types of exploitation. The point is that trafficking has been seen to disproportionately affect women and girls. 71% of the victims detected worldwide female in 2016. This is going to shift, of course, because all we can tell ourselves about is those who are revealed through police actions and national reporting mechanisms. But at the moment, we're looking at over 50% as women, 20% detected victims are girls, and that makes you 71%. Other targets in Goal 5 actually need looking at the elimination of all harmful practices, protection and value of paid domestic work. For years, that was hidden away from trafficking and is now being paid much more attention to, but needs to be looked at radically across India as a way of how social system works in terms of how women get out to work. They're normally employing another woman inside the house, and to look at that very carefully as to those people's protection and how they've been recruited and how they're used. Granting women equal access to economic resources, have a think about that. How's that working right across the board in India? Ensuring effective participation and equal opportunities for leadership. How is that going in India? Just to remind us what strong female leadership might lead us to, and looking at COVID-19, actually the countries that so far are doing best, I'm just saying, have got women leadership. And one of the things that's come out is that there has been attention to truth-telling, to compassion, to early action, to looking at prevention and rapid response rather than bluster, avoidance, denial, and failing to take things as seriously as they should have been. But that's another discussion. Decent work and growth, and economic growth. 8.7 is the target you're looking at in the SDGs for directly refuting and addressing trafficking vulnerabilities. And here you see that what's being looked at is the immediate and effective measures to eradicate forced labour, end modern slavery and human trafficking. The Global Slavery Index estimates that 25 million people were victims of forced labour and 15 million victims of forced marriage in 2016. 1 in 4 victims was a child. And there is the indicator directly looks at child labour, but we need to be looking at labour right across the board. And other targets are there, promoting safe working environments. Just think about this in your own context in India, in your own region in India, and from across the world. Think about this in terms of how is your nation actually addressing all of this, promoting safe working environments and the creations of regular avenues by which people can safely migrate. Our own country is not doing so well on this one, which is, I'm talking from the UK. It affects all of us. There are systemic factors that create vulnerability to trafficking in the first place. And this is what I'm going to have a little look at as we go. One thing that COVID has done, it has to reveal the inequalities. It reveals the inequalities. For example, just picking on the Gulf, for example, in the densely packed, poorly sanitized labour camps that people have been building the Gulf phenomenon, they are at massive risk of rapid infection. And I'm not sure how that is being recorded at this point. We will only see the disaster in about 18 months' time as the body counts of those who failed to come home are revealed. Migrant workers lack access pretty much universally across the world to local healthcare systems, whether we're in America, whether actually we're in Britain, whether we're in Germany, whether we're in India, Nepal, wherever. It's a real problem. And also we're seeing a surge of nativist and nationalist political rhetoric, which makes migrant workers very easy targets for exclusion. Wherever people are excluded, trafficking vulnerability kicks in. So what do we need? Here's the third SDG that is particularly targeted for countering trafficking, peace, justice, and strong institutions. And really that's what PM has been talking about. How are our peace, justice, and protective and enforcement institutions actually working? And it's a real problem that actually these institutions have been a bit slow to respond tactically, but it's now coming. Here are some of the things. I mentioned birth registration is important. It's important that human trafficking across the countries have a good legal response, but there's other stuff to go on inside this to make our countries really resilient against both recruitment into and supply of and demand for. I just want you to have this one, and there's a couple of others. Wealth of nations more than a marketplace. Some of you will be economists, and if you're not economists, you need to have some understanding of global economy and your nation's economy. We have had a pact with economic man, thinking that all we need to do is pay attention to what's happening in the market. Actually, this is not the case. This book makes it very explicit that the economy is way beyond what just happens in the economy of exchange. It affects what's happening in our kitchens. It affects what's happening in men and women's lives, the whole of men and women's lives. I will be looking at this in our symposium, which is happening at the end of June. You need to have a think about this and look at this. Pay attention to this one, because we've been playing against human trafficking pretty much on level 4. That one is very tactical and will always lead us getting back into the same mess that we're in today, actually. Because where we need to really pay attention to, as well as on the tactical, is on level 1 and level 2. And you see that the change period on that looks like from 10 years, worst case scenario, 1,000 years, better, more optimistic levels, 100 years, where we really change how we view what we're doing internationally. We are interdependent beings. COVID-19 has told us one thing, and we're not learning it very quickly. One thing, unless we deal with COVID-19 internationally, cooperatively, with fresh eyes of trust and open sharing and committing ourselves to our interdependence, not only as nations, but right down the levels to every level of vulnerability, we will not crack what COVID is sending at us until, of course, we get a vaccine. Well, you know what? You can't vaccinate from exploitation unless the vaccination comes from a whole system's commitment to behaving differently with one another in terms of respect for every single person on this planet, no matter what their caste, no matter what their class, or no matter what their ethnicity, no matter what their age. And that is hitting at level 1 and level 2 change. It affects our belief systems. It affects our political systems. It affects how we talk about and think about one another. And that is a very, very, very deep challenge to be looking at. The formal and the institutional, level 1 and level 2, that needs to be going on at the same time that we hit this level 3 and level 4. SDGs are playing at level 3 level as well as level 2 level. So please pay attention to what's going on in the SDGs. Can I have my last slide? Summer Symposium 2020, all are welcome, because we are going to be going live on Zoom for this, because we simply cannot know whether we can meet offline. It will be online. You're all welcome to register. Take that www note at the end. The full details of that will be available by the weekend. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your attention. Sorry that we don't have more time to explore what's going on there, but the Sustainable Development Goals are so critical for understanding the deeper matrix that we need to address in addressing human trafficking. Thank you, and namaste.
Thank you very much, Dr. Carey, for that great presentation. that helped us understand SDGs, the significance of achieving SDGs, and the impact that COVID would have on these. Thank you so much for wrapping up within the time, because we have to be mindful of all those participants who have signed up from multiple time zones. We have our next presentation. Presentation is going to be on human trafficking and victim-sensitive approach. Our first presentation was on human trafficking and the impact that COVID has on human trafficking. And our second presentation was the impact of COVID on SDG goals. And now we are going to understand how it's impacting, how COVID is impacting victims and what kind of approach you and I have to have. And for that, we have a great speaker, Dr. Kalyani Gopal. Dr. Kalyani Gopal is the founder president of SAFECHR. I don't want to call that out. I don't know how to pronounce that. And she's also the president of Illinois Psychological Association. She's going to be great in presenting us on victim-centric approach. Dr. Gopal is an award-winning international speaker, and she's also a trainer on human trafficking and child sexual abuse. She has trained a wide range of stakeholders, including judges, FBIs, and police officers. She has developed an internationally accredited human trafficking curriculum. It was a training curriculum that she came out with for professionals and advocates. Please do reach out to her if you are in need of that curriculum. She is also a great author. She is the best-selling author of The Support to Foster Parenting Step by Step, and she is also author of workbook In My Heart and workbook on child sexual abuse. She serves on numerous boards. Again, in the best interest of the time, I'm not calling out all of those. She now serves as a chair with many associations, and she's the board of director in American Psychological Association, APA. In recognition of her work, she has received several awards. She was awarded the Indiana Lake County Award for Excellence in 2004. Indiana Attorney General's Voices for Victims Award in 2015, and Top 20 Global Women of Excellence United States Congressional Medal of Honor in 2019. Recently, in March 2020, Dr. Gopal was appointed as member at large for the Committee of State Leaders for the American Psychological Association. Can't wait to hear from Dr. Kalyani Gupta. Over to you for the next 15 minutes, Dr. Gupta.
So I'm going to speak with you today about, thank you so much for inviting me to this amazing webinar. I've just been transfixed by Dr. Nair and Dr. Ford's presentations, just loved it tremendously. And thank you, IJM, and thank you, Sathyabama University of Science and Technology for hosting this webinar. I hope those who are listening are able to get what they wish from this training. What I'll be talking to you about is very specifically, I'm switching gears from the larger picture to the very narrow, very, very critical aspect of all our work, the psychological underpinnings of human trafficking. I'm going to be talking to you about how do you say, hey, how are you? I'm happy I rescued you. Now, what do you do? And so what is the sensitivity that's involved in interviewing victims of trafficking? So let's go to the objectives. There are 3 objectives, but for the purpose of this specific training, we'll be talking about 2 major objectives. One of them is what are the key differences between the presentation of victims of trafficking and those of other crimes. And then we'll identify the 6 stages of victim-sensitive interviewing in human trafficking. We may not have time, we actually will definitely not have time to actually conduct an initial victim-sensitive interview. But what you'll be left with by the end of the presentation is the ability to have the knowledge and the theory behind why and how you conduct a victim-sensitive interview. What are the key differences between trafficked and other victims of crime? Let's look at them. The major issue with victims of trafficking is that they don't really see themselves as trafficking victims, but they see themselves as human beings who got into a relationship. It has some ups and downs. It has some very negative relationship issues, but also had some positive issues. And that's where the trauma bonding comes. when you talk about sex trafficking specifically versus labor trafficking. So when you are talking to a victim of human trafficking, one of the major issues you need to look at is what are the immediate needs? What is it this person needs? Do they need housing? Do they need clothing? Do they need soap? Do they need a relationship to talk to family members, relatives that they know? What are their needs? What are their immediate needs? Other questions you also start to think about when you deal with victims of crime that are related to human trafficking versus other crimes is questions of safety. Are you safe? Is there anyone around you? Are you being threatened? Do you have money? Do you have your passport? What is it you have? What is it you don't have? These are questions we ask. And then the challenges are taking a victim of sex trafficking away from their trafficker. That is literally the major challenge we have, because research has shown that 78% of these victims end up returning to their trafficker. And the reason why they do that is we're not rescuing them, we're actually intervening with them. So oftentimes what we do is we'll say, hey, why don't you come and talk to me whenever you're comfortable? Here's my card, this is my name, this is where my office is. Whenever you're ready, just come talk to me. That's intervention. When we go in and we say we're rescuing these victims, oftentimes what happens, especially with our older victims, the ones who are 17 and 18 years old, they end up heading back to the trafficker because of the trauma bonding that is so intense. It's something like the Stockholm Syndrome, but there's a caveat to that. And we don't have time to go into those details, but I'll just share this with you. So shame, guilt of family knowledge, the bottom girl syndrome, which is actually the individual, the young lady who is pretty, she's got jewelry on, she looks fabulous, she's well-dressed, she's got expensive things on, and she goes and tells another girl who's bored, who just wants some attention, who actually doesn't have enough, who's been sexually abused, who has one of the ACEs, which I'll get into later. You should reach out to that girl and say, hey, you know what? I have a great life. You want it? And the girl says, yes, of course. And so what happens is this bottom girl then is a recruiter for these other girls. And then there's a lack of identification documents that goes across labor and sex trafficking, which you've heard about already. There's an oversight with the pimp. The trafficker is literally maybe on a bike close to this young lady or young man. And then there's debt bondage. So there's myths and facts related to human trafficking, especially from the psychological concepts here. You look at self-identification. They do not identify themselves as victims. I could say this repeatedly. I've said it a million times, and still patients will say, oh, you know, that I am not a victim. I don't even know why I'm here. And they get extremely angry when interviewers say, I have saved you from human trafficking. That's the last thing they want to hear. So we don't rescue them, we intervene with them. They cut across all SES, all socioeconomic status, all strata, whether it's poverty level or it's millionaires and billionaires. The male-female ratio is used to be 80% female and 20% male. I have boys in my clinic traffic. I've seen girls. We always think of trafficking as being transportation issue. However, it is not a transportation issue. They're not transported from place to place. It can happen right within the same state. There is no choice. These are prostituted individuals. There's no question of choice. And if someone tells you as a sex worker, this is a choice, you have to go back in history and say, what was that choice? So I work with them as well. And these are issues they come at. They work in strip clubs. I see a lot of people who work in strip clubs and these dancers. And oftentimes they have comorbid diagnoses of bipolar disorder, ADHD. Many of them have PTSD from childhood issues. PTSD is post-traumatic stress disorder. I want to go one slide here with the ACEs. There's 10 ACEs. I'm actually modifying that scale. It was developed in the 1960s by Vincent Felitti. Dr. Felitti was doing work with the CDC. And he and I are now working on modifying the ACEs so that we actually include migration, we include bullying in schools, we use cyberbullying. So I'm modifying that scale, and if you're interested in working on that. So let's go to stage 1. Stage 1 is impact stages of human trafficking, 1 to 6. These are the 6 stages, and this is based on the work I've been doing over the past 20 years or so with victims of human trafficking. Actually, I was 17 years old when I saw my first victim, and I didn't even know this. I was working in Tihar jail collecting data from Delhi University from the girls who were in Tihar jail. The young girls, they were my age, which is funny. I was only 18 at that time, 17, 18, 19 at that time. Actually, I was collecting, by the time I finished data collection, I was probably close to 18 and a half, 19, finishing my bachelor's degree. And the girls were disappearing in Tihar jail. And I didn't know where they had gone. I'd go one day, collect data on them, and the next day I'd come back, the girls were gone. So they were servicing the high-level dignitaries who came to Delhi. So when you look at the impact stages of HD victim interviews, there are 6 stages. There's interviewer victim awareness. There's making appropriate preparations. There's planning and establishing rapport with the victim. Actively listening to the narrative. Close the interview. The closing stage is very critical, and recognizing the vulnerabilities and fears of the victim, and transferring the contents of the interview into record via transcripts. So let's do stage 1. The stage 1 is what I'm going to talk about briefly, but I'll really highlight stage 3 the most, which is rapport formation. So anyone who just begins working in the field, how do you develop a rapport with that victim? That leads to everything else. Unless you have a good relationship, an empathic relationship, sincere and authentic, if you cannot come across as being sincere, authentic, and genuine, you can actually forget doing this kind of work, because this is very labor intensive. It takes sessions and sessions and sessions before they open up. But once they open up, they're actually yours. They will say, they will comply with you, and you'll be able to cut across the trauma bond. You'll actually be able to overcome this trauma bond with them, and they will work with you, and they need your help with that. So there's dependency needs, there's cognitive needs, which is thinking. How do they think? They think through the trauma bond. Trauma bond is a very addictive, very intense relationship between the trafficker and the individual. And what the interviewer needs to always be aware of with victims of human trafficking is that the trafficker is in the room with you all the time. And your goal as an interviewer is to let that victim know that you are actually more powerful or as powerful as a trafficker and are actually able to protect them. At the same time, you need to be extremely honest and tell them, I cannot always protect you. I'm not capable. I don't have superhuman powers. But when you're in my office or within my vicinity, I can help you and protect you. But beyond that, I cannot. So that honesty level is very critical for them, because they don't want to be lied to. They've been lied to their whole lives. They don't need any lying. They don't need any statements which are, pittance statements. So look at the condition of the victim. How old are they? Are you dealing with this 18-month-old baby like I have? Are you dealing with a 14-year-old girl? Are you dealing with a 25-year-old woman, a 30-year-old woman? Who are you dealing with? Are you dealing with a male victim of trafficking? How many times did they try to commit suicide? Think about it. The boys go from trafficking to suicide. The girls go from trafficking to domestic violence and death and homicide. So look at the gender, look at the mental health issues. Were they diagnosed with anything as children? Did they have difficult childhoods? What were their ACEs? Look at the physical health. How do they appear to you? Where are the bruises? Are there any bruises, if at all? So what are the support system? Is the family supportive? Are they willing to take them back? Do they even have a family? Did the family traffic them? These are all the areas you need to be very careful, because these are the areas that impact the narrative. So what are the fears? Cultural beliefs, number of sessions, multiple. You will not get to the child, to the victim in one session. Contamination happens from the time the child or the adult gets picked up, because we don't ask leading questions as psychologists, but it's possible that they have been asked leading questions which are closed. So there's a big difference between closed-ended questions and open-ended questions. And we call what's called a funnel approach. You ask very open-ended questions initially, and then you funnel it down to the actual human trafficking. So that's important to know. Also, you want to know, are they on the internet? There's a study done by the Department of Homeland Security and the Pew Institute, and they have found during the COVID times, in this is 2018 study, but in COVID times it's that much higher, because almost everyone is doing e-learning in America at least. And they found that 50% of the children had cell phones, their own cell phones, mind you, these are young children. And NCMEC, which is the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, found that 18 million cyber tips for child internet exploitation were received in 2018, out of which 98% were strangers. So keep these numbers in your mind as we go through this whole interviewing process. So look at the stage of preparing. So this is so critical. A lot of times I get patients who come in, but they've been in a police station right before they came to see me. Please don't do that. Please do not interview this young person or older person in a police station or a courtroom or a government building. Nothing to do with government. They've already been told they're going to be incarcerated. They're going to be put in jail the moment they get picked up. And so what do? We pick them up and bring them to a police station. So don't do that. Take them to an office which doesn't look anything like a police office or a police station. Take them to a room which has a couch, which is comfortable. The doors open. There's people walking around, and there's a sofa. There's good lighting, soft lighting. These are very good, important things to consider. So there should be only 1 or 2 investigators. Only one person should take notes and write the report, while the other person speaks directly to the victim. Why is this important? This is really, really important because if both people are writing notes, the victim is already somewhat paranoid. And if you cannot speak directly to the victim and you cannot talk to them and you don't tell them, you know what, I'm sorry, this is what I say, by the way. I say, I'm sorry, I don't always remember everything. I'm really growing older and I can't keep up with everything and everyone who comes in. When you leave, I'll probably forget everything you said. So I need someone to help me take notes. And that's what I do. So explain yourself, keep your tone of voice very calm. If when they're talking to you, don't raise your eyebrows, don't make facial gestures that look like you're shocked, because they're always testing your shock value. And if you're easily shocked, clearly, obviously, this wouldn't be a good place to be. So this is some place that you want to go where you're able to talk very clearly, very slowly, very comfortably with the patient. I literally say, hey, do you want a glass of water? What can I get for you? I walk with them to the kitchen. We get some water. We'll come back. If they're hungry, they're usually always hungry. Give them a snack. And when you give them a snack, I always give them a closed packaged snack so that it's not open and they feel safer that way. So learn about the case, learn about the dynamics, learn about the culture. But this is what you do. This is the preparation that goes into it. So what are the knowledge of elements of trafficking and the victim's mindset? Powerlessness, helplessness, worthlessness. So treat the person as a human being. See what you need. How do you feel? What can I get for you? And then the rapport building stage, recognizing their reality is very, very important. Establishing eye contact and watching your body language and your verbal communication. This is part of a book I'm writing. It's called The Psychological Basis of Human Trafficking. And if you look at the top of the pyramid is the loss of sense of self. That's what you're dealing with. You're dealing with an individual who has lost their sense of self. Other aspects of it is fear of reprisal, low self-worth, illness, and recognizing the victim's reality is very important to build relationship. Watch your tone of voice and keep your demeanor very stable. So actively listening is stage 4, and we have only 2 more stages left. And you're looking at the culturally sensitive listening skills. So what are the behavioral indicators or emotional indicators, even the verbal communication aspect? Build rapport. We talked about that already at great length. Show concern. Ask questions. For example, what do you mean? Because whatever the words that they say may mean something different to what you think they mean. So always clarify. Am I understanding this to mean? You're saying that. Is that what that means? So then what happens? So give cues, nod your head, look empathic, rephrase what they were saying, and provide feedback. And then summarize at the end. Would I be correct in saying, well, they're so used to being misunderstood? So when you look at the closing interview, you're checking in for the vulnerabilities. You're going to leave here. We're done with the interview. You're going to leave here. Where are you going to go? Do you know where we're going to take you? How do you feel about where we're going to take you? What are your fears about where we're taking you? What are you worried about? Are there some protective factors? Remember, should we call your sister? Should we call your brother, your father, mother? What do we want us to do? Review everything. Tell them the next time what to expect. And clarify the expectations of what's going to happen. And then finally, record keeping. You have to transfer all the information that you have, because over multiple interviews, their stories have changed. So keep the authenticity of the record. Because when I go to testify as an expert witness, this is what I say. I said that record is going to keep changing, and that leads to the authenticity of the record. Security, keep it locked at all times, and protect the individual's identity. And thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gupta. Questions are pouring in. I will take some questions during the Q&A for you. Thank you so much for that great presentation. We all learned, including me, I learned as to how we have to have victim-centric approach when we deal with victims of human trafficking. We are moving on to the fourth session. Fourth session is on human trafficking and post-COVID-19 responses. We learned a lot about the impact that COVID would have on human trafficking, SDGs, and on victims, and now we are going to learn about responses. And our presenter for that session is Commander Ashok V.M. Kumar. Commander Ashok is former naval officer, an alumnus of the 93rd National Defense Academy, who has had a decorated career with the armed forces where he commanded warships. He led highly sensitive transnational missions of the highest order. During the course of his naval career, he has held positions with Navy, Coast Guard, Marine Police Force, and Naval Police Investigations. He also provided security for vital national assets. He has also trained officers at the Indian Naval Academy and was instrumental in setting up key marine police station to combat human trafficking by sea. If you want to understand human trafficking that happens by sea, he is the person to go to. Commander Ashok has been directly involved in the rescue of over 3,600 women and children from the bondage of human trafficking in the last 3 years alone, working with about 10 states across India, working with police and with judiciary. Commander Ashok is currently serving many organizations as senior consultant for human trafficking issues, including the International Justice Mission. He is the recipient of Chief of Naval Staff Meritorious Commendation. He is the recipient of Director General Indian Coast Guard Meritorious Medal for saving maximum lives at sea. Flag Officer Commanding-in-Chief Commendation for saving lives on a burning vessel. You should know who you're going to listen to. So I'm calling out all of this and the positions that he held in brief. He was a commissioned naval officer for 24 years plus, and he was head of Naval Police, Chief Security Officer at Vizag Airport, India. He was navigating officer, regulating officer, signal communication officer, cryptographic officer, and missile specialist, and expert in search and rescue at sea. There's a lot to share. For want of time, I am not sharing all of that and moving on to his current role. He is now serving with International Justice Mission as Regional Director for Investigations and Law Enforcement Development for South Asia Division. Over to you, Dr. Commander Ashok.
Thank you, Merlin, for the wonderful introduction. I'm really humbled this morning to be part of this wonderful webinar hosted by Sathyabama University of Science and Technology and International Justice Mission, and also to be part of the finest eminent panelists on the virtual platform. I think for me and Dr. Nair, this is the first webinar we're doing it together. Otherwise, we've been part of a couple of other platforms which are not non-virtual platforms. We've done some seminars in this country. My special thanks to Dr. Nair, and thank you, Merlin, International Justice Mission, the background team that has worked so hard to get this going. We really appreciate, and it's a great learning to be part of this wonderful platform. So I'm going to start sharing my slide. Well, I'm going to stick to my topic, and I have just got about 6 slides that will take you through my short time that is allocated to me. Well, I'm going to discuss with you right here in our backyards. I'm going to come down to grassroots. I'm a guy who works on the field, so some of my conversation is what is the lens on ground. You heard my previous panelists speak to you at the level which is academician, the subjects, terminologies. I think you know all the glossary of words of human trafficking if you've heard the 3 panelists preceding to me, because you have understood completely. So I'm going to go down to the lens, back in the backyards, okay? Human trafficking post-COVID. I want to stick my conversation to the status, where it is now, and what is the response, okay? My presentation will purely be teasing you out. I hope the teasers will stimulate you to ask questions so that we will be able to answer them, okay? In 15 minutes, I can't tell you everything that is happening on the ground. It's humanly impossible. So I'm going to put some teasers in my conversation as we move forward. Well, what I'm going to discuss with you applies globally, South Asia, and the Indian subcontinent, what I'm going to talk to you. In my entire understanding of, I'm working with almost across 16 to 17 states with the Director General of Police's, departments of law enforcement, on day-to-day basis, various organizations on advisory capacity, consultancies, whatever information that they need, we're able to support. So I'm able to pick out 17 indicators or 17 important aspects. I don't have time to discuss all 17, but out of 17, the top 3 for your understanding of what is COVID in the lens of human trafficking which is applicable to all the 3 regions. First, this is a season of financial crisis, and I'm going to explain to you why it is important for us. Therefore, it has taken the economy on a regression curve. Many of you understand what regression, we're going back to the state of being underdeveloped or developing country further by at least 2 to 3 decades. Second indicator, severe loss of jobs has caused a second R, which is redundancy, significant redundancy. People do not have jobs, which was not the scenario. And the third is a regulated system of law enforcement has actually put everybody into the backyard. As Dr. Nair said this morning, we're all being regulated now by the law enforcement arm. So 3 R's, which are globally, South Asia, and for the regional continent. It has caused regression, it has caused redundancy, and it has got regulators. What was it prior to COVID? Prior to COVID, the need of human trafficking to survive was predominantly financial crisis. Predominantly financial crisis. At least 76% of the contribution towards this huge multi-billion industry came from financial crisis population who really needed money. Some kind of a trap they got into. Okay, and therefore the second and the third, there were no dearth of jobs for people. The traffickers had a list of jobs to offer. That has changed during COVID. There's a huge redundancy in jobs. Secondly, traffickers operated in an unregulated environment. That has changed during COVID. It has become a regulated environment. You can't go to the market to pick up your vegetables without being stopped at a place today, correct? There is a significant amount of regulated environment. So COVID has brought us the 3 R's into place. So what has it led to? It has led to a chaos and desperation. Almost every victim who's been trafficked worked because of desperation, but chaos comes along, and therefore it has become an ideal environment for human trafficking. Ideal environment for human trafficking. Human trafficking prior to COVID almost was able to balance the curve of supply and demand, but now because of COVID, the supply has diminished and the demand has increased. Just to give you a view of what happened to the environment. Why I say it's an ideal environment. Supply has come down and there's a significant demand that is on the rise. And I'll show you in the subsequent slides about. So this is what has happened post-COVID to the environment of human trafficking. Prior to COVID, the demand and supply curve was almost on the verge of balancing. They exactly knew what the demand was and they knew how much to traffic. With an attrition of 20%, they was permitted in the trafficking network. So there was a panel that was moving forward. Reduction in supply and a distant rise in the demand is the environment that we are living in, the present status. I hope it helps you out. Now, post-COVID, there is an assumption. The assumption is lockdowns have led to reduction or suspension of trafficking and slavery activity. Fantastic, very fantastic assumption. But the reality is, whilst any reduction is a positive consequence, it always masks the full picture. It will never give you a complete picture. And I'm going to help you. Again, I've got about 17 indicators to explain this point. I'm sticking to 3 Ds for you to take back. 3 R's in the beginning and 3 Ds. So that's easy for you to remember the 3 E's. First, what has happened to the reality? The reality of this assumption is this. The online viewing has doubled. I'm not going to get down into numerical numbers. It is significantly doubled. Dr. Carey explained it in her presentation, and I'm sure Dr. Nair mentioned it in his cyber presentation. The list can go on. Significantly for you to understand, during COVID or post-COVID, this is not going to change. It is going to remain doubled. Second, the existing victims, the first part that I discussed, the doubled is pertaining to the trafficker network. So there's a sizable rise in the trafficker network, okay? Second, the existing victims are living in absolutely debacle, absolutely situation of fiasco. Why am I able to say that? Today, there are no available contraceptives for women. They are engaging without contraceptives. Basic medical amenities are not available for them. What was a child of 12 would engage 16 to 17 clients for a meal of 3. Today, she has to engage, I don't know how many more, because the basic amenities are not within her reach. Okay, so there is a huge fiasco. They can't go back like the migrants back to their homes. They don't have a significant community to go back. The government provisions do not reach them. So there is a huge fiasco. There's a debacle as far as the victims is concerned. Now, what has happened on the demand side? Oh my goodness, on this online sexual platform, the demand has significantly raised. The free internet in Italy has shown a significant rise. Some statistics says 3 times, some say 4 times the rise of the pornographic views. And today, Dr. Nair said, let's take a walk, let's take a decision today, almost like a freedom call, Inqilab Zindabad, like what Nair sir called out. And he specifically said, let's take a decision to actually end it. So the 3 Ds post-COVID. The trafficker network has seen a great demand, which is doubled. The existing victims are in a state of fiasco, a debacle, and then the demand on sexual online platforms has actually rised up. Okay, how are law enforcement combating today? Well, before I begin, I want to just say salutes to the frontline law enforcement agency. Every officer who's there on this panel, every law enforcement officer, my salute, my naval salutes to you. You guys have done it so exceptionally well. Fantastic. Ministry of Home Affairs, everyone, police department, social department, hats off to you, man. Proud, call you. I could say true heroes that you've really done a fantastic jobs. And I can talk about you for hours, a whole webinar on the police enforcement, law enforcement, frontline. I can take a whole webinar, and I'm sure Nair sir can do a fantastic seminar on that. Some of you, I'm giving you ideas in case you're planning to invite us. But just going to throw, you have done a fantastic and great sense of applaud. Let me capture some positive glimpses of how the law enforcement is handling this issue during COVID. Okay, the positive glimpses is stringent regulatory mechanism has enabled us to contain human trafficking within the space where it is. Well done. Borders have closed, restricted control, excellent, fantastic. There's a significant reduction in the missing persons data. Well done. Well done, law enforcement. There is a high community response, not because the community wants to respond, because of a confidence level in the law enforcement during COVID. And it's amazing to see pregnant women standing along with the law enforcement people to serve the needs of this nation. What a confidence, what an assurance. Fantastic, that's a positive glimpse. The negative glimpse as we look at is, there's a surge in child marriages, which indicates to me that the traffickers have now merged or moved into a new dimension. In my early years of learning of anti-human trafficking or organized crime, there are 7 organized crimes in the world, and one of them is human trafficking we're discussing today. And in my learnings as a law enforcement officer of human trafficking with specific, they would always say an organized crime is an amoeba. You cut it, it'll grow somewhere else. But in this case, there's a huge surge in child marriages. I'm just teasing it out, I'm not explaining it to you. There's a community merger of traffickers. Traffickers are managed to become part and parcel of regular citizen community. There's a grooming and marking of vulnerables happening during this season, okay? And finally, the closure of schools has taken away midday meals for 300 million children. The rich are hooked onto the internet, but the middle and the lower class are getting constantly groomed by the traffickers, whether we like it or we don't like it, okay? I'm just throwing the positive and the negative aspects for us on the glimpse. Well, who will do this role? I will just say in my list, there are about 37 stakeholders who can handle human trafficking, which comprises of primary, secondary, and the support role. But I'm going to talk about the top 7 primary stakeholders and what they need to do, okay? I can give you a huge list. I'm not going to go through that list, but I want to give you 5 S's for this entire 7 primary stakeholders. First, it's time for us to spear innovation. We have to spear innovation. Second, let us sustain the regulatory arm. Let us sustain the regulatory checks. Let's not call it off soon after the COVID is over on the subject of human trafficking. My request to the primary stakeholders, senior officers, people who need to take decisions, influencers, implementers, initiators, humble request, sustain, keep going on the regulatory arm. Third, let us synergize. Let us create a synergy on the trafficking bill, which called the fourth P into human trafficking. Human trafficking was 3P concept. The fourth P was added, which is partnerships. Let us start to handle partnerships. I'm glad to see Dr. Kalyani and Dr. All experts and specialists coming on to discuss the subject. Let's work in partnerships. Let's synergize partnership. Fourth S, let us share best practices. Let us not just keep it to ourselves. It's time that we share our best solutions we've evolved during the season of COVID. And finally, final S, let us be smart policing, vigilant policing that attends to the needs of citizen security. Attends to the needs of citizen security. Not just being a punitive policing. So my request to the front-end primary law enforcement agencies, the frontline warriors, 5Ss, peer innovation, sustained regulatory attempt, synergize partnership into your system, share the best practices, and smart policing is the advice I would like to give for the platform. Human trafficking products, I will just take last 2-3 minutes. We have 3 products that fascinate me. Okay, the moderator this morning is Merlin. She has pioneered justice system transformation under the umbrella of International Justice Mission. You can talk to her, she'll explain, but let me just give you a capsule teaser of what justice. This justice system transformation is evolved out of 2 decades of hard work of social workers, investigators, lawyers, all platforms of community, and they worked in 3 significant areas to showcase how a region can be trafficking free. What is justice system transformation? It involves, first thing, casework, reactionary function of the law enforcement, criminal justice system, and the public justice system. They have taught them in the first decade how the public justice system and the criminal justice system should react to the detection of human trafficking. The next decade, they spent a sizable amount of time transforming system reform by teaching them it is not just reacting to the crime, you also need to regulate and put measures into place. So both arms are merged into justice system transformation, and they're now moving into the third phase of sustaining gains, and where Dr. Carey's presentation on sustainable gains helps us understand, and goal number 8 and goal number 16 are interesting for us to pursue on this subject, and we can discuss. So this is one model available for the world to absorb readily, and Dr. Merlin will be more than happy to take you forward. Second, Dr. Nair quoted the book on locus effect. I love the chapter 11 of locus effect. I must have read it 5 to 6 times. A favorite of this book. Chapter 7 very clearly talks about demonstration projects of hope. And it's a beautiful chapter if you never read it. He talks about how when communities rise, when communities stand up to defend their needs, when communities call out for protection, when communities seek action against violence, the community becomes safe. They become absolutely safe. It is time now, during quarantines, to set up safe communities, to make our backyards safe, as the first point of my presentation. It's time. Last, regulatory arm, which was ignored, which was only used as a prevention part of the human trafficking. It's time now, during COVID, that we've seen the regulatory arm of the law enforcement really kicking in. I'm excited to see, especially the South Asia region and globally, the way regulatory arm. To give you an example, the recent London Metropolitan Magistrate did a rescue during COVID. Many of you must have read it. They've rescued women and children as part of a COVID regulatory function, and they detected at least a significant amount of women, young children from China, and significant amount of women from Romania. An example, read that case, and it will be mind-blowing how the regulatory arm has ensured human trafficking is actually curtailed. Hats off to the Metropolitan Police who did the great and wonderful job. These are the 3 products that you can take away at the end of this discussion. Okay. As I conclude, thank you. It will take all of us together to end human trafficking. Thank you, Merlin. Thank you, honorable panelists. And thank you, the University Sathyabama, for giving me this opportunity. Over to you, Merlin.
Okay, thank you so much, Commander Ashok, for that insightful, exciting presentation. It came with a lot of passion, and thank you for all those hours. And yes, I wish I could explain all of that once again, but you made it so well. You explained it so well. I love it, so I feel I should, recap it. Let me not do that for lack of time. Anyway, peer innovation, sustained regulatory arm, synergized partnership, shared practices, smart policing. That was amazing. And thank you for talking about the justice system transformation model as well. We're happy to inform anyone who comes to us with questions regarding that model that we have now. We're moving on to our next presentation, which is the last presentation of the webinar. That's from UNODC. We have Ms. Deepika Naruka. She's going to speak on human trafficking during and post-COVID. Deepika will speak for about 10 minutes, and then we will have question and answer time. As I said already, there are a lot of questions pouring into our chat box, and making a note of some of those questions to respond to give to the panelists and to find response from the panelists. Deepika Naruka works as the program coordinator for countering transnational organizational crime and trafficking with the UNODC's regional office for South Asia. She comes with a lot of experience. She has worked on human security, gender, and development issues in many countries. And with UNODC, she has been working across Asia Pacific and at the headquarters on programs related to countering trafficking in persons and drug trafficking control. She has also worked with UN Disarmament Research, UNIDIR in Geneva, and UN Development Program, UNDP, in India. And she also worked with WISCOM, Women in Security, Conflict Management and Peace of the Dalai Lama Foundation. Her academic background is quite interesting to me. It's international relations and chemistry. What a great combination, Ms. Deepika. She comes with higher specialization in conflict analysis and UN peacekeeping from the University of Kent at Canterbury. Over to Ms. Deepika. Please give your presentation to 10 minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to IJM and to Sathyabama University for giving us a chance to be a part of this eminent panel. Most of the panelists have already spoken and taken words out of my mouth, laid out the key points related to trafficking and response and what's happening in the region. Primarily for the benefit of the listeners, I just want to talk a little bit about what UNODC does, because some of them might not be knowing about what our forte is in this area. I work with UNODC Regional Office for South Asia. Our office covers 6 countries in this region. We work with Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Maldives, Nepal, and Sri Lanka. We've been in place for about 2 decades, and our overall work is on countering drugs, trafficking, and terrorism. I will not go, next slide please. I had prepared slides related to definition of trafficking, but I will not go through those. What I do want to mention here is that in South Asia, we find that often there is a sort of confusion between smuggling of migrants and trafficking in persons. And we find very often that, the dimensions of the two scenarios are very confused, even when we work with the criminal justice system and the law enforcement system and so on. So I want to just explain that, one key difference for the listeners is that in the case of trafficking, the exploitation continues when you reach the destination, while in the case of smuggling of migrants, that might not be so. But increasingly, our studies in the region are showing us that there are such strong interlinkages that a segment which has started off as smuggling of migrants might then morph into trafficking and continue into different directions. Other thing which I want to talk about a little bit is the UN framework, because all of our work, all of UNODC's work and that of other UN agencies is a part of the normative framework laid down by the UN, and the key convention that we work under is the UN Convention Against Transnational Organized Crime, the UNTOC. In the region in South Asia, it's been signed and ratified by Bangladesh, India, Maldives, Nepal, and Sri Lanka. And we are working with the government of Bhutan on advocacy and awareness related to UNTOC. Overall, globally, the status of the UNTOC as of today is that it has 147 signatories and 190 parties, countries which have ratified and acceded to it. There are 3 protocols which are part of the UNTOC convention. The protocol which is most relevant to us for the discussion today is, of course, the protocol related to trafficking persons, especially women and children. Now, globally, if we look at it, there are, as of today, 107 signatories, 176 parties. And in the case of South Asia, it's been ratified by Bangladesh, India, Maldives, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh very recently, just a few months ago. What this normative framework allows us to do is to work on the 3 Ps. The UN follows the 3P format. So we work on preventing trafficking in persons. We focus on protection and assistance to victims and on prosecution of traffickers. To that, we've added in South Asia 2 other Ps, which are partnerships, policies, and provision of services to victims and survivors of trafficking. I will not go through these in detail at the moment. Happy to take questions later on. UNODC also since 2006 has been working on a global a report on trafficking in persons. It's a research report where the data is gathered officially from the various governments and we analyze the trends. And I just want to, in one slide, share with you some of the key trends that we are seeing from the latest study that was published last year. What we've seen globally is that most of the forms of trafficking, which is the highest, which is reported by the government, is that of trafficking for sexual exploitation. So that comes up to 59%, whereas we are seeing also increasing trend in trafficking for other purposes. And increasingly, there are reports of trafficking for online exploitation, for adoption, for organ removal, and also in the case of South Asia, we've seen for issues such as skin grafting. What our study also shows us that out of the victims which are detected, a majority are male, but a high number of children are also being detected. And of course, within the children, primarily 27% of the victims are girls and 4% are the boys. An interesting shift in the reported data that we've seen over the last 10 years is that increasingly more and more men and boys are being reported as victims of trafficking. And I think that has to do also with an increased, a better understanding among the government functionaries that trafficking in fact just does not impact just women and girls. It is also manifested in forced labor, organ trafficking, where men and boys are also involved. So there has been the reporting system, the data systems that the governments have established have improved over time, and we are seeing better reporting coming in, better numbers coming in. In the case of South Asia, as Dr. Nair also mentioned at the beginning of his presentation, most of the trafficking for us in India is internal. And that is something which is replicated in the other countries that we work in as well in the region, with about 96% of the reported cases of trafficking being from within the region, and only about 4% which are reported cross-border. Now, the only thing which I want to highlight here is keep in mind that these are the reported cases. So we are literally just looking at the cliched tip of the iceberg, because what we see as being reported is minuscule amount of what actually exists on the ground, like other panelists have also shared. As the speakers have shared in the past, that in South Asia, we are seeing countries which are not just the source, but also countries which are transit and destination countries. Increasingly within India, we're also seeing that, a lot of the states which were traditionally considered to be source states are now becoming trafficking destination states, which is a very interesting modification of the trends that we are seeing on the ground. The region, like Dr. Nair also mentioned, is the second largest number of internationally trafficked persons, which is when we are looking at only the cross-border dimension. Trafficking of children in South Asia has been reported from almost all countries. And for different countries, the manifestations are different. For example, in Maldives, it is more related to, say, education for violent extremism, for example. For Sri Lanka, it is more related to migration and so on. But what we are seeing is that increasingly younger and younger children are being trafficked. And trafficking for sexual exploitation is reported more than other forms. But again, that is more so because the understanding in the region was more that, it primarily for sexual exploitation. But like I said, now the reporting has improved. We work a lot with the government institutions, and we've started working with the National Crime Records Bureau on trying to understand how the systems on the ground can be strengthened so that better data can also come in from the different anti-human trafficking units in the different states in India. That work is still ongoing. One problem that we face in all of the countries in our region is that there is a lack of data. So not much information which is available on the actual numbers of victims, of investigations, of prosecutions or convictions. And what we find is that unfortunately South Asia is one part of the globe where the convictions and the prosecutions are very, very dismal. So although a lot of work has happened on the ground, ultimately, like other panelists also pointed out, the outcome is not reflected in a higher number of prosecutions and convictions. So UNODC's work revolves a lot around working with capacity building initiatives with the law enforcement to explain and to develop tools on how the prosecutions can be improved, how the processes of investigations can be improved. Currently undertaken a brief assessment study on the impact of COVID on the trafficking scenario. And I want to just leave you with, the final 6-7 points of what UNODC suggests should be our response when we develop programs in the post-COVID scenario. So we recommend that the COVID-19 responses must be continuously monitored. So whatever the measures are put in place, we have to make sure that the measures unintentionally do not impact the vulnerable groups such as trafficking victims negatively. That we have to ensure that access to justice for the victims is safeguarded. So I know a number of, like the child welfare committees, the DCPUs might not be functioning on the ground in India, but wherever feasible, we have to ensure that technology is utilized to facilitate, access to judicial processes and enable the continuation of evidence, submission of documents, and so on. This process needs to continue. Then we also recommend that law enforcement officials must remain vigilant. While their focus right now is on enforcing COVID-related lockdowns and related issues, but they have to be vigilant to addressing the new and evolving crime patterns. And like other panelists also said that, these will change because the demand is increasing, and in our region, increasingly as migrants come back to the home countries, there will be challenges related to livelihoods, there'll be challenges related to security. Already the UN is seeing across the globe the number of calls that are coming into the helplines on domestic violence have drastically increased. So all the push factors are also something that we need to keep in mind. The service providers must remain flexible. That is our recommendation, that they have to adapt to the evolving environment. And lastly, that there is a need for systematic data collection and analysis. And that is a recommendation which continues. It was there in the pre-COVID scenario, and it is increasingly even more important now as we go and deal with the new normal, that we have to remember that no country is immune to it. And for any evidence-based program, we need to have data which can be analyzed so that adequate programs can be put into place. That's it from my side. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ms. Deepika, for that presentation. Thank you so much to each of the participants and to each of the panelists for great presentations. To sum up, there's quite a lot again. Let us invest in partnerships. That kept repeatedly coming in from the first presenter to the last presenter, that we need to establish partnerships for increased collaboration. Partnerships with law enforcement, partnership with government, partnership with prosecution, partnership with civil society, partnership with general public. As the governments and communities do their best to contain COVID-19, a great amount of planning will have to go into dealing with the imminent impact of the crisis, especially in terms of providing safety to the vulnerable women and children across the globe.
So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and of course for a few, good night also. I want to propose vote of thanks to all the panelists for their extremely brilliant presentations, and of course the way they carried the sessions is highly impressive. And then Sathyabama Institute of Science and Technology and School of Law from that particular university is aimed to spread knowledge and information regarding human rights issues, and of course regarding anti-human trafficking, and in which I happened to meet Professor P.M. Nair, sir, who is a catalyst and also always an inspiring person, who really paves the way and also lead people, youngsters, students, and professors, and also many sectors of people. And I always feel like I'm blessed and really lucky to meet him at some point of time in my life. And he is the person who instigated, and he has become catalyst in carrying the programs regarding human trafficking. And our university established anti-human trafficking cell under the guidance of Professor P.M. Nair. And Sathyabama is one of the pioneer institutions in India, imparting knowledge in the areas of engineering, science, technology, management, law, dental, pharmacy, and nursing. It is accredited with A grade by NAC and approved by AICTE, Government of India. It has been ranked 41st position by the National Institutional Ranking Framework, Government of India, among the universities in India for the year 2019, and ranked one among the top 50 universities for the past 4 years consecutively. And the institution has been awarded 4-star rankings for its overall performance by QS, the world's #1 ranking agency. So Sathyabama Institute of Science and Technology is a research intensive institution and offers multidisciplinary academic programs at undergraduate, postgraduate, and doctoral level. It has a team of dynamic and outstanding faculty, innovative pedagogical practices, and state-of-the-art infrastructure. Sathyabama Institute has alliances with leading universities, industries, and research establishments across the world. It is a potential destination for students across the globe owing to its admirable academic and research ambience under the guidance of our Chancellor, Ma'am, Dr. Maria Zina Johnson, youngest Chancellor in India, and President, Sir, Dr. Mary Johnson, who is providing the necessary thrust in all the development activities of the university. Positive academic ambience prevailed in the campus has made the university to be ranked as second among private universities in Tamil Nadu by National Institutional Ranking Framework, Ministry of Human Resource Development, Government of India. University also declared as one among the top 31 deemed to be universities by the Times Higher Education Ranking. Sathyabama wrote a special page in the history of space research on 22nd June 2016 with the launch of Sathyabama Sat, that is the satellite that has been made by our students in association with ISRO. The university aims to be the destiny of efficient and responsible social engineers. Those are fit enough to serve the society. So we are really happy to get associated with International Justice Mission to organize this webinar. And on behalf of our institution and on my personal behalf, I extend University of Cambridge, and I extend my thanks to Dr. P.M. Nair, IPS retired, former head, National Disaster Response Forum, Government of India, who is internationally acclaimed and United Nations recognized expert on human trafficking matters. I also extend my thanks to Dr. Kalyani Gopal, who is a clinical psychologist, forensics and neuropsychology, Indiana, Illinois, Florida. Thank you, madam. And I extend my heartfelt thanks to Commander Ashok V.M. Kumar, who is Indian Navy retired officer and regional director, Investigation and Law Enforcement Development South Asia from IJM. And I extend my thanks to Ms. Deepika from UNODC, Regional Office South Asia. And last but not the least, I extend my heartfelt thanks to all the organizers from International Justice Mission, Merlin Frida, for really moderating the session in a very lively way. Constantly, I was getting messages about the brilliance of the panelists and, of course, the way the session has been carried. Thank you very much, madam. And I also extend thanks to Dr. Devasitham and Julius Cecil for their support, constant support, I can say, right from the inception or initiation of the program till its completion. Thank you, one and all. Thank you very much.